Victory Day is the most important annual event for Russians. But this year it has added significance because of the conflict in Ukraine. 11,000 troops paraded through Red Square in Moscow to commemorate the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany 77 years ago. An estimated 27 million soldiers and civilians from the Soviet Union died in what the Russians call the Great Patriotic War. President Vladimir Putin used the occasion to compare the fight against Hitler to his so-called special military operation in Ukraine.
You're fighting for our people in Donbass, for the safety of our motherland, Russia. May the 9th, 1945 will always be a triumph of our single Soviet people. Russia's preemptively rebuffed the aggression. It was timely and the only right decision, the decision of a strong, sovereign, independent country.
As the missiles and other military hardware paraded through the streets, onlookers backed their president's decision to send Russian troops into Ukraine.
I think the operation had to take place. We must win it, bring it to its logical end. Only this way, not a single step back.
I fully support the decision of the Russian government. I don't condemn it. I think we would have ended up with Nazism. This is evil.
We must erase all this in Ukraine. This fascist tribe must be wiped out from the world completely. That's why Putin is doing everything right, always.
Putin didn't say when the operation might end, but he also didn't use his speech to broaden the conflict or make a formal declaration of war, as some had feared.
This war appeared to be much more difficult and bloody than we expected. We expected that this will be a battle for Donbass will continue probably until the middle of summer, and then based on the result of this battle on Donbass, new political decisions will be made.
Putin laid flowers at memorials to the 12 so-called hero cities, which include Odessa and Kiev, for outstanding heroism during World War II. The commemorations continued as President Putin led the procession of what Russians call the Immortal Regiment, carrying a portrait of his father who fought in World War II, defending the city of St. Petersburg. He was joined by thousands of others who lost relatives in the war. Similar ceremonies were held across Russia and in occupied territories of Ukraine. In what is left of Mariupol, Russian-backed separatist leader Denis Pushilin told a small crowd that Russia is here forever. President Putin says he has no doubt that the military operation will achieve its objectives in Ukraine, while he continues to use his country's past to justify its present, a tactic that's proven to be mostly successful so far within Russia.
Yes, so there was some question as to whether the Kalish Orchestra were breaking the rules by talking about the situation in Mariupol, because Eurovision has strict rules about people not evoking politics from the stage, and there was some question mark over whether they might not be disqualified because of that, and then the decision came pretty quickly that they would absolutely not be disqualified, which I think also reflects the level of sympathy and understanding that there is for Ukraine. And this confirmation of that sympathy around Europe is certainly something that means a lot to Ukrainians. They're always asking me, what do people in Britain, what do people in France really think about us? Do they really support us? So all those votes there coming in give them a reassurance that yes, indeed, they really do. Though I did speak to some Ukrainians who were worried that they would only be winning because of the sympathy vote, and they wanted to be proud of the actual song. This morning there was a debate on the radio about that with a musical expert who was reassuring the public that he was absolutely convinced that even without the sympathy vote, even if it wasn't because of the war, that song would have at least come in the top 5. There is also a concrete result, of course, of winning Eurovision, which is that you have to host it next year. So that's a big and interesting question, and something in a way for Ukrainians to look forward to. Will it be possible somewhere in Ukraine for the country to host the Eurovision Song Contest? Certainly, people very much hope that it will be. The President Volodymyr Zelensky even went so far as to say that he hoped that Ukraine would one day, perhaps not next year, but one day, even manage to host the Eurovision Song Contest in a liberated Mariupol, rebuilt and under Ukrainian control.
And Gulliver, then, just in terms of the actual combat, Ukraine has been retaking territory in its northeast. British military intelligence today suggesting that Russia is losing momentum in the Donbass. What is the latest?
Yes, so as Boris Johnson congratulated Ukraine for its Eurovision Song Contest win, the British military intelligence published a report that seems like a great gift to the Ukrainians. I mean, if it's true, it's one of the most damning reports on Russia's war performance that we've seen yet from foreign public intelligence publications. They say that Russia has lost as much as a third of the forces that it deployed in Ukraine and is going to need at least a month to regroup before it can really relaunch its offensive in the Donbass. But what the Ukrainian military are saying is that, be that as it may, they're not really stopping. They don't seem to be withdrawing in order to regroup. They're continuing to pummel cities like Severodonetsk and to try to advance in the Donbass region, but without that much success. The real question now, or the thing to watch in the coming days, is whether the Ukrainians are going to be able to carry on moving eastward from Kharkiv and cut off the Russian supply lines heading south towards Izium.
Once an idyllic street on the edge of town, now a giant crater, bricks and mortar ripped apart. This is all that remains after Russian forces targeted the outskirts of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine. Many people's hearts and souls went into building these homes. The war has destroyed so many. But some people are glad to be alive and grateful for what they have left.
Thank God everything is all right. What is there to be scared about? I have 6 children, 5 sons and 1 daughter, 9 grandsons. I've done everything in life I could.
His feet crunch on shattered windows as he tries to salvage what he can. One of his few neighbors who's still here offers him a cigarette. In the same town, the Russians hit this dormitory with a rocket. We're told it was meant to take out a bunker. Russians frequently use long-range weapons to destroy targets anywhere in Ukraine.
We found all of that stuff today in the morning. When I heard the explosion, I went down on my knees and the shrapnel came over my head.
Some people told us they had seen Ukrainian military in the area. The front lines are not far away. The Russians are making a push for more territory. An ambulance crew heads close to where the battle is taking place. While they wait for casualties from the front line, we're given camouflage for our vehicles. Let's go.
We've just had to take cover because a jet was flying overhead and we had to spread out. But this is what's happening on a daily basis for even those that are trying to help the wounded.
There's no let-up in the fighting. We're forced to turn back. The constant sound of heavy artillery can be heard and felt all day and all night.
From afar, the signs of the fighting are in the form of white trails in the sky and in billowing black plumes of smoke after a facility was hit by Russian shells. Up close in the streets of Bakhmut, in the Donetsk region, the signs of intensifying fighting are in the form of crumbled buildings and harrowing tales of near misses.
It was simply a blast. There was no other noise but a blast. Everything was flying around. A piece of wall was flying here, another there. I hid behind the house and everything fell to the ground here.
Located in eastern Ukraine, Bakhmut is along a key highway that Russian forces are trying to seize, for it links it to other regional cities. Currently trying to take complete control of Rubizhne and thus Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, Russian forces and Kremlin-backed separatists are thought to have made gains here in their fight against Ukrainian troops. In Lysychansk, falling shells and blown-out windows have, of sorts, become a part of everyday life.
We used to be scared of the explosions. We're used to them now and can even identify them. We'll try and survive. All we want is peace and for it all to end. We just want to live in peace.
Amidst the constant fear of shelling, it is access to water that's also a challenge. An airstrike hit a nearby water pipeline, forcing residents to rely on even the murkiest of puddles for fresh water.
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock is now the host for a flurry of high-level diplomacy. She returned home from a trip to Ukraine earlier this week and is now chairing a meeting of foreign ministers of the G7. It'll be followed by NATO and European Union meetings to try and increase pressure on Russia and support for Ukraine. One country, though, is causing major problems. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, re-elected last month, opposes further energy sanctions. The EU wants a ban on Russian oil imports by the end of the year. Even though Hungary and Slovakia will be given exemptions, Orban is still threatening to veto.
The question is if Hungary shows bigger solidarity to its European allies and partners, or it shows bigger solidarity with Putin's Russia. So I very much hope that in the end, Hungary will make the right choice because it will be really impossible to square their participation in EU and NATO if they continue to block these sanctions because of special ties with Putin.
If you drive about 3 hours from where the G7 foreign ministers are meeting along Germany's Baltic coast, it brings you here to Lubmin. This is where the Nord Stream pipelines, which run from Russia to Germany, terminate. This place sums up what's been achieved by the West in recent months. Unprecedented steps like the mothballing of Nord Stream 2, something the US had been demanding for years. But the other pipeline, Nord Stream 1, is still operating. It delivers 55 billion cubic meters of natural gas to Germany a year, an indication of the vast sums Europe continues to pay to Russia for its energy.
Neutral but prepared, ready to defend their nation that long relied on its own military strength. These Finnish conscripts are practicing an attack by an imaginary enemy. But since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Finland, which shares a border of more than 1,300 kilometers with Russia, feels threatened by its large neighbor.
Obviously, it's shown that our neighbor is willing to use force if necessary, and that changes things.
Before the war in Ukraine, only around 25% of Finns supported joining NATO. But this has now gone up to 76%. A dramatic change in a country that was invaded by the Soviet Union in 1939 and made an agreement to stay neutral after the Second World War ended.
Thanks very much, Putin. You made it. You made it. So obviously, we politicians, we are living in representative democracy. We must respect also the people's opinions. And that's where we are.
The Social Democrat Party MP was one of Finland's staunchest opponents of NATO membership. Not anymore. It's a huge turnaround for many in Finland, believing for decades that staying neutral is key to their security. They now say that Putin's actions have pushed them towards NATO. While Russia has made it clear it's not happy with this decision and that it will react, the Finns just hope it won't retaliate. Joining NATO means Finland will be protected by its Article 5, saying an attack on one member is an attack on all. But it's the grey period of a number of months before membership is formalized that worries the Finns. While the UK and other countries have offered security guarantees, the Finnish president is trying to reassure Russia.
In my thinking, this is quite simple, actually. We increase our security and we do not take it away from anybody.
I'm almost sure there will be no major issues. Some political disapprovements, etc., that's true, but no aggression. So I'm not actually afraid because I still trust a little bit that also in Moscow they have brains.
That's also what the young soldiers are hoping for.
I think if we were part of NATO, then there would be so much backup. So, no, I'm not scared.
Having a well-equipped army of nearly 300,000 soldiers, Finland says it will be an asset to NATO. While these conscripts are looking forward to working together with other nations, joining the alliance will put an end to a long and peaceful period of neutrality.
Over in Kyiv, the preliminary hearing for the first war crimes trial arising since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. A captured Russian soldier charged with the murder of a 62-year-old civilian. Let's cross live to France 24 correspondent Gulliver Cragg. There was no plea submitted. This is uncharted legal territory.
Yes, this is the first time that there's been a war crimes trial in Ukraine. Ukraine hasn't created a special war crimes tribunal or anything. It's just happening in an ordinary criminal court. The suspect, though, was in the dock today. His name is Vadim Shisimarin, and he's 21 years old. He's a sergeant in the Russian army, now in Ukrainian captivity. This was a preliminary hearing to set the date for the first hearing proper, which will be next Wednesday, the 18th of May. But as it's such a historic event, it was absolutely packed with journalists. I mean, you could really not fit in there a huge amount of attention, and both the prosecution and the defense lawyer appointed by the Ukrainian state, had a lot to say about what was going on, about the evidence, its witnesses that basically saw what happened, that this Russian soldier apparently shot an unarmed civilian in a village in northern Ukraine. That's quite rare compared to some of the other places where war crimes in Ukraine have allegedly been committed, where there is a lack of witnesses, because people in Irpin and Bucha, well, first of all, so many of them had fled those areas, and then those who were around were mostly hiding in basements, partly to avoid falling victims to the Russians themselves.
He's considered a defendant, not a prisoner of war.
He's considered a criminal defendant. Yes, it's a criminal case. The defense lawyer explained that that is just the way that Ukrainian law works, that this will be a criminal trial. But as I said, he has been given a defense lawyer. It's not yet clear what his plea will be. Apparently, he has admitted to killing this man, but he has not yet pleaded guilty, in the sense that his plea may be, but this is speculation here, and the defense lawyer himself speculated on this whilst making clear that the decision had not been made. He may plead that he was following orders and therefore had no choice to enact the orders of his superiors. The prosecution lawyers said that if that were to be the case, then that plea would have to be taken into account and might affect the sentencing, but it certainly didn't absolve the Russian soldier of all responsibility.
Was the case held in Russian or Ukrainian?
Oh, in Ukrainian, of course. The Ukrainian is the only official language in Ukraine, and so the Russian defendant had a translator on hand to translate from Ukrainian for him.
How did he seem?
Young. I don't know what else to say about it, really. He didn't show any emotion on his face. I can't say that he looked, I really can't say that his face revealed any emotion at all. The most striking thing about him, of course, was that he's a very young man. He's only 21.
At first glance, the German-Russian Museum in Karlshorst might seem an unremarkable building. Yet, within its walls are reminders of its importance in history, for this is where the tyranny of Nazi Germany was finally ended, when its most senior soldiers surrendered to their counterparts from the USSR. Tens of millions of Soviet citizens had been murdered in Adolf Hitler's war of annihilation. And so this was a victorious moment of unity for Russians and Ukrainians. Yet 77 years on, those two peoples are again at war with each other. And for the director of this museum, Vladimir Putin's military actions in Ukraine now have persuaded him to remove the reference to Russia in his museum's name.
The propaganda in Russia is focusing on all the naming in the World War II and talking about fascists in Ukraine, which is a lie. So our job will be to make clear what really happened in history in World War II.
In the decades that followed, generations of Germans were told of the sins of the Nazis, and thus the feeling seemed to take hold: don't antagonize Russia. Rather, do deals with it. Draw it into the community of nations through trade. Above all, give no country weapons with which to fight Russia. It's a policy the present-day Ukrainian president has repeatedly called on Germany to renounce.
The war's here, and every time we talk to Germany, we remind them that we have war and they have something they don't need, which we need a lot.
Many here share that view. They feel Germany should be helping the Kiev government much more. And now, finally, so too does their chancellor.
I respect anyone's pacifism. I respect any attitude. But it must seem cynical to a citizen of Ukraine to be told to fight back against Putin's aggression without weapons. This is something that is out of date now.
With weapons like these, millions of Russians and Ukrainians fought and died to defeat the Nazis. What might those soldiers have thought then to learn that one day their two countries would be at war with each other? In 1945, many in the free world saw the Russian soldier as a friend and liberator. Far fewer do so now.
With the coming of spring, the fields of Ukraine have turned bright green, wheat and other grains sprouting as far as the eye can see. But even farming is risky in a country at war. Workers now wear a safety vest. Because of the shelling, especially at dawn, says Petro Bezverchny. He usually produces about 10,000 tons of various types of grain per year. But 2022 is full of anguish.
Most of our farming land is in the Kherson region, now under Russian occupation. They stole what we'd stocked in our warehouses and in grain elevators, and we will lose the autumn and spring crops. There is a drone video that shows my warehouses burning. We have massive losses. Some colleagues still there tell me that the Russians want to confiscate land and create collective farms, like during Soviet times.
Before the war, Ukraine produced about 100 million tons of wheat, corn, rapeseed and barley per year. It was also a top producer of sunflower oil. Only 20% was for domestic consumption. The rest made its way to markets in China, India, the Middle East and Africa. But since Russia's invasion, exports have nearly stopped. Ukraine now is looking into other options to export the grain. One of them would be to transport it by train to a neighboring country. The problem is the railway system needs to be adapted. The Soviet-built tracks are wider than European ones, so stocks need to be offloaded and reloaded before continuing their journey. About 25 million tons are wasting in silos around the country since Russia imposed a blockade on the Black Sea ports like Odessa, since operations have come to a grinding halt. Other maritime routes through Romania or Bulgaria are being considered.
Ukraine exports 10 to 14% of world demand. We are number one in sunflower oil. Now we have excess of oil and sunflowers. World prices are at a historical high. If the export question isn't solved soon, the prices will continue to increase.
Finding ways to rein in global prices is a priority at the G7 summit. But with the war raging in the east and south of the country, where the main agricultural regions are located, production is likely to decrease by as much as 35%. Making it one of the most urgent humanitarian crises to be solved to avoid shortages in global food supplies.
Under cloudy skies and light rain, thousands of supporters of abortion rights took to the streets of Washington, D.C. The weather perhaps symbolic of what they say will be dark days ahead if the right to abortion is overturned.
It is a huge decision in a woman's life. But it is her body, it changes her life, it changes everything.
The outrage stems from the leaked draft opinion published earlier this month suggesting the Supreme Court was poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, the landmark 49-year-old ruling that said the U.S. Constitution guarantees a person's right to terminate a pregnancy.
And it's not going to just stop because the law says so. It's just going to drive women to more dangerous procedures.
One of the speakers at this rally was Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who recently has opened up about getting an abortion herself as a teenager.
It was my body, it's my choice. That's what it was.
The rally, organized by a network of mostly abortion rights groups, was one of more than 300 companion events planned nationwide on Saturday. This one in New York also attracted thousands of people.
Who took to the streets? This would be one of the most significant reversals of a fundamental right in the history of this country. It would not only be a nightmare for women and girls across this country for generations to come, with ripple effects around the world.
The Lancet, one of the oldest and most respected medical journals, agrees, and in a new front-page editorial says if abortion is banned, women will die, and Justice Samuel Alito and his supporters who want to overturn it will have blood on their hands. A recent poll found that roughly by a 2-to-1 margin, Americans think Roe v. Wade should be upheld. Only 28% think it should be overturned. But to those who do, often argue abortion is akin to murder. People opposed to abortion are also planning rallies in the coming weeks before the Supreme Court issues its final ruling on the matter, which is expected this summer. But on this day, it was about protesters taking to the streets to protect a right they know could be slipping away very soon, but one in which they say they will continue to fight for.
I love you, Mommy.
I love you, Albert.
4-year-old Albert Butler wears a backpack filled with a specialty formula that slowly feeds him 22 hours a day. His mother, Jess Butler, says this is what her son with special needs must have to grow.
It was super critical when he was an infant, and this is like the only thing that he could tolerate, and it was kind of the first time we saw any growth out of him at all was on this formula.
But store shelves in the United States are running out of infant and toddler formula. The tracking firm Datassembly reports there's 43% less of it nationwide. Pandemic supply chain problems started the trouble, and a factory closure in Michigan made it worse. Abbott Nutrition, maker of the popular Similac brand, halted production after several babies got sick and 2 died after drinking possibly contaminated formula. The government investigated and found no further danger, but the company says it will be weeks before production resumes. Butler has taken extraordinary measures to find formula for her son, even flying across the country to buy it from a woman she met online, only to be scammed.
She never showed and eventually just blew me off.
Parents say walking out of a store with baby formula can now feel like walking out with gold. Hoarding has become a concern, with stores now limiting how many they sell to each parent.
It's important to remember that for babies on formula, this is the only food option. There is no substitute. And I think we have to probably reevaluate what critical infrastructure really means.
Critics have blamed the White House for failing to help. President Biden met with retailers and baby formula manufacturers on Thursday, hoping to help ease the shortage.
I think we're going to be in a matter of weeks or less getting significantly more formula on shelves. And the FDA is also going to ensure we can import and still maintain the high safety standards.
For now, parents are making do by turning to food banks or just feeding their children less.
Let's all work together because these are babies. You know, they gotta eat.
For parents, there's no more urgent need than this: nutrition for their hungry children.